So, hello.
Hi.
We are live now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Let's Talk series, where I share conversations with those who support multicultural and multilingual families navigate their international lives successfully. When raising our children abroad, transmitting our languages to our children can feel overwhelming, especially when we are the only person who speaks that language with our children in their first years of life. This is why finding our so-called multilingual village where we live is so crucial. Today, I have the honor and pleasure to talk about how to create a playgroup in the minority language with Kat Jeffries, who is a Polish-born language teacher, trainer, and translator living in the UK. She's a teacher, trainer, and academic manager, and runs a Polish language group online and face-to-face called Krokodil, I think,
That's right.
to help support Polish parents in her local community and across the world. She also organizes local training sessions for primary school teachers in East Sussex in the UK, as well as for local parents to promote the importance of transmitting home languages. And last but not least, of course, she enjoys also passing her enthusiasm onto her 4-year-old trilingual son and his friends through music, movement, and love of reading. Now, Kat, before we dive into the topic, I would like to ask you to tell us more about your background, maybe the languages also that you speak, when you learned them, and your experience as a teacher.
Lovely, thank you. Hi, everybody. I was born in Poland, and my entire family is Polish. So I was a monolingual child when I was little. I only started learning English around the age of 7 when I started primary school. That's when we start primary school in Poland, and I did quite a lot of English, at school and some extra classes outside of school. I was always pretty good at it, I think, probably thanks to my uncle who lives in Canada, who helped us in a sense that he used to send us parcels over with the Lion King soundtrack, or all sorts of presents that helped me and my sister learn English through songs, through dance, through movement. But it's something we kind of had to do with our teachers or at home by ourselves, because our parents don't speak English very well. At 16, I started learning French, and I really got into it. So within 3 years, I got to the advanced level, and I moved to France to do my degree there. So I did a degree in English language and Russian studies in France, in French, quite a lot of translation, English to French translation, and that's when I picked up some Russian and Spanish on the way. But those were languages that I simply, had to learn because I wanted to learn them at the time. So I'm not a bilingual from birth, myself. However, I use a lot of languages on a daily basis. And this is what we talk about at Peach, the project that both Ute and I are involved in. The fact is that you can be bilingual or multilingual if you use those languages on a daily basis. So I've got a background in translation, in public service interpreting, although most of my experience lies in teaching English as a second language. So I've always taught adults, mostly in the UK, and these days I train teachers. I teach them how to teach English to other adults. I don't actually have a lot of experience of working with children, at least when it comes to teaching English to them, or teenagers as such. So setting up my little group was really one of the first experiences of teaching children. I managed to pick up on some ideas that my mum had shared with me. My mum manages, she doesn't speak English, but she manages a very, very successful language school back home in Poland. They use the Helen Doron method, which helps children learn English from the age of 1. So again, they do a lot of singing, a lot of movement, a lot of repetition. So she managed to share some ideas with me, which was amazing. But I think one thing that I would like to talk about here, maybe a little bit later, is that I am a teacher. Yes, I have set up a language group, but you don't have to be one, because for example, my partner in crime who runs the Polish group with me, she is the most amazing person in the world, and she has no background in education. She is dyslexic. She's a completely different type of person to me, and she's still able to run a very successful group.
That is amazing. Yeah, I didn't know about all your background, your multilingual background, and where you're coming from. But it's a very encouraging message that you're sending there right from the beginning, that we can all start it. And I would like to know much more about, of course, about your play group. And this is actually then the first question. You have created this play group, Crocodile, for the Polish-speaking children in your area. Can you share some of the most important aspects one should consider when setting up a minority language playgroup? There are so many things to take into account: the location, the time, how to get people involved, like you said.
So if we want to focus on running a playgroup for children who are, say, up to the age of 5, of course, it will depend on when they start school in your countries. Here in the UK, children start at the age of 4. So this is, we mostly work with children aged, I would say, 12 months to about 4 years old. So I think the main thing to consider is whether you want to do it just on your own or with the help of somebody else. I have the pleasure of working with my friend Amira, who I met by chance in a sandpit in the park. And we both decided that our children needed an extra source of language. We worked extremely well together. But of course, if it's only your idea, you might want to look for a partner in crime, or you might want to do it yourself. The reason why we did it together is because at the start, the goal was for the group to serve our children as well. So we had children, at the time she only had 2, now she has 3, and they were all up to the age of 5. So, very small children who required a lot of attention from us. And that's one of the things you might want to consider. Will you be taking your own child along? And if so, you might need some extra help, because there are all sorts of needs that children have, even during the 60-minute class that you are trying to run. Okay. You might want to consider the time of the classes. So, depending on the age of the children, think about nap time, school time. I know in France, children start nursery or creche a lot sooner. So would they all be going to those institutions, or would you be meeting them in the mornings? So think about those things. In terms of the location, again, we're very, very lucky in the UK, because there are all sorts of places that you can approach about those things. There are council-run halls, there are church halls, which will rent rooms out to you for an hour at a very low price. But you can also approach cafes. So say there are a lot of coffee shops around here with rooms at the back that they rent to yoga classes or to playgroups like ours. So that's one place that we are using at the moment, and it's very, very successful, because of course this means that after the class the parents are able to continue socializing, whether that's within the park or within the cafe, etc.
Yeah.
You might want to do it at home. It depends on the size of your house, the space, how many people you want to invite, and how much of a private person you are. Some people don't like to invite people over to their places. If you potentially belong to a religious group, you might want to approach them. They often have spaces to rent out, and in fact, if they know that you are doing something to promote the minority language and the culture, they might want to just give the space to you for free as well, because again, this way you're bringing the parents together. So there are lots of different places, and I think that really depends on where you are and what is possible within the place that you live in. In terms of, I think you also need to think about the frequency of the classes. You have to think about your own availability. I have a full-time job, and I need to make sure that I find the time to run my group. And some people don't work when their children are small, and maybe they have a little bit more time. Think about the parents as well that you might be approaching. Maybe the area that you live in has, is famous for some sort of industry, and so a lot of people work in the same place, and their hours are sort of similar. So think about that. Think about when they're actually likely to attend classes. In the past, we had some feedback that a lot of people knew about our group, but they weren't able to attend because of work or because of nursery commitments. You might want to run your class weekly, like we do, but you don't have to. I know that there is a Japanese group in our area that meets once every 2 weeks. There is a lovely Italian lady who runs a group for Italian speaking children, and she only meets with them once a month. And that's also fine. So I think you have to be realistic about how much you can commit, because really the main thing is to start it and then to carry on for as long as possible, right? You might want to think about whether you're going to be charging people for these classes or not. And of course, all the factors like room rental, your availability, whether you have another source of income will come into play over here. How much time you're planning to spend on preparing the class every single week. Because of course, it's great to start with a great deal of enthusiasm, but after a while, that might wear off a little bit. So what you want to do is to feel like you're actually getting rewarded for these classes. We started off by simply taking donations from parents, because at the beginning we were still working it out. We weren't quite sure what we were doing. We were learning on the job, and we were also taking our own children along, who at the age of 2 or at the age of 3 had better and worse days, as you can imagine.
Yes.
So we felt better not charging a lot for those classes, and this meant that we would have up to 20 families joining us each time, which exactly. However, these days we charge a lot more for the classes. We take payments up front for the whole term, and this means that we don't need to rely on, for example, the flu season and people being unable to attend and therefore not paying for the classes, right? And so that gives us the motivation to keep going, because we feel like we're still being rewarded for it. It's not a lot, but still, we feel like we are being rewarded.
Yes.
So think about that.
Yes, no, that's amazing. I saw also here in this region, I'm in the Netherlands, around The Hague, Rotterdam, Delft. I've seen many playgroups come and go for different reasons and come for different reasons. Well, the coming reason is mostly the same, because you want to find a community, you want to connect with other parents. This is also a very important part, I think, of young parents who raise a child with that particular language, and then they want to have also an adult conversation every now and then with someone else, and also to find the connection or provide a certain connection for the children with other children who share the same language. So what you mentioned is, yes, we can start them really on the go, so to say. Maybe at our own place, or in a place that is not very expensive, or that is just a cafe, like you said, etc. And I would like to add another thing, because I know that people are maybe watching this now live or later on from different places around the world. And what we have here is also, there are some restrictions for these kind of groups. That's to say, safety restrictions that you cannot necessarily, but this is then the responsibility of each parent, right? We're talking about play groups. That's to say, it's a group that meets where the parents stay. So they are responsible for their children. But I observed this, as I said before, across different languages and cultures. And there are some parents who then said, okay, I bring my child, even if they were very young, but they were already going to daycare. And I bring my child, leave it here. I just go quickly shopping and then I come back. These kind of things are a bit tricky. And this is, I think, where then on a continuum of very spontaneous play groups towards maybe even a business-run play group, there need to be very clear signs from the beginning, maybe, and to be very clear with the parents and with the others you organize it with, that you share this responsibility for the child or for the safety, for whatever it is. For example, what we have here are also restrictions, or let's say recommendations, that you have a first aid certificate if you run anything that has to do with children. And that were requirements that we had. And so we did our first aid course, and we have to refresh it every 2 years. These are just examples that, of course, are not touching now the multilingualism, but that come into play when you want to have a safe place, because you want to provide a safe place, right, for these families, not only to enjoy, but also to have this. So setting this now apart, you're mentioning the different kind of types of groups and activities that one can do. You are running a group from with children from, you said, 12 months up to 4,
5.
4, 5. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit more about the different type of activities you do? Or
Sure. So I think this very much depends on the kind of children that you're working with. Yes, definitely the age. And we're not in the position to split this group into two. I know that sometimes you would think it might be better to have a different group for younger children, say up to the age of 2, and then the sort of older toddlers can join a slightly different group. We haven't got enough people to work with within our area in order to split the group right now. So again, you have to be quite realistic about that, and you also have to think about their proficiency levels, because of course it will depend on the families that you work with, what kind of bilinguals you're trying to work with there. So whether they're active bilinguals, whether they're passive bilinguals, whether they can understand what you're saying to them, they simply don't want to speak or are unable to speak but because they're too young. Or whether, say, we had examples of children who were 4th generation Polish, and their parents, which was beautiful. We had 2 children like that, and their parents spoke English at home, but they wanted them to join the group to learn more about the culture and the heritage, and to develop that interest in the country itself, which is also amazing. But we have to be realistic about how much those children can achieve if they don't speak the language regularly at home. So therefore, you're going to have to adjust the activities, the level of language, to the children that you're working with, of course. And yes, I just wanted to go back to the fact that having parents at the group is, in my opinion, extremely important, because one of the main points of running a group like that is to provide the parents with tools that they can use at home. So we make it very clear that the fact that your child is going to attend our group for 60 minutes every single week, it's not going to replace your efforts. So we're here to be this additional source of language, but we're not going to teach Polish to your child if we only meet one time a week, once a week. So this is extremely important, that we're there to teach the parents what to do, how to work with their children at home, right? And to help children realize that there is a real need to speak that language, that there is a community within which we speak the language, that mommy or daddy use that language to communicate with other people, and that it's a fun place, it's something that you want to be part of as well. So just to go back, just to answer your question. So the kind of activities that we do vary. Of course, we run regular, so weekly classes, whether that's face-to-face or online, and we change the type of activities depending on whether this is a face-to-face setting or an online setting, because of course the dynamic can be quite different. But every now and again, we'll organize meetups in the park, treasure hunts, or anything else that can help parents practice the language. So say, we recently met to make some gingerbread biscuits together. And this is a really lovely informal setting at one of our houses, and it meant that several children were able to get involved. So, we added this sort of sensory play, of course, with rolling out the dough and, cutting out the biscuits, decorating them, tasting them, and of course you can, this could be your lesson, right? Because there is a need, it's around a theme, it's fun, it's something that children want to do. You might want to organize meetups at certain times of the year, so say Christmas or Easter or any other celebrations that are important to you. I know that lots of people organize midsummer meetups or anything that you think children will find fun and the parents will want to get involved in. In Poland, it's quite big to celebrate Children's Day, International Children's Day, on the 1st of June. So this is something we like to celebrate as well. So those are the different formats, and it's just to sort of give you a little bit of food for thought. You don't have to have a structured class every single week. It could be an informal meetup at a playground within a group of parents, with simply to help children realize that it's normal to speak your language. It's fine, it's fun, it's there is a need for it, right? So
Yeah.
this is good enough, and you can build on it depending on your availability and what kind of time you have.
Yes, absolutely. I find it very important to point this out, because as you mentioned before, well, some parents are maybe reluctant on starting something like that, or even sending their children there, because they think, oh, I don't speak that language so fluently, even if the children are very young, but you can get in touch with others and get into that language again if you want. And if you want your child to become also some kind of attracted to the language and motivated to speak the language or to reply at some point, we are talking about very, very young ones, but also about those who are emergent verbal children in the different languages. Maybe they also speak more the other language and are a bit reluctant in speaking the Polish language in your case now. But I find it very important also to point this out, that you don't have to be a fantastic storyteller, a musician, an actor, or anything, because these play groups, what usually we want to convey is this feeling of community, that there is something outside of home in the micro society, so to say, of the family, where this language is appreciated, is people is proud to use it, and where you can talk about all kind of topics, the weather, it can be anything, but also do these activities like you mentioned, the gingerbreads now this time of the year, or an Easter egg hunt, or something else. There are so many ideas, and I think if one starts with this kind of idea, you find so many other parents who have ideas to add, and then you can talk to the other parents in the group. And maybe what we did was also to assign everyone, okay, you take it over next week or in 2 weeks, and you're going to do this activity, and I bring, I don't know, the paper and the colors, etc., so that it becomes like a group project which involves everyone. It's not like a school where you go, or where there is a curriculum. You can also define a curriculum, like you said. It's very open, right? You have different kind of settings, but I know that there are some parents that maybe have other kind of expectations. I mean, I've experienced that many times, and there were also some discussions about that. Can I ask you, how do you manage the very diverse expectations from parents who, you mentioned it briefly before, who maybe are expecting the children to learn something? We're talking about acquisition and learning, to learn how to, I don't know, to say the alphabet, which is a big thing. I don't want to get there. But how do you manage these diverse expectations from parents in your group now, particularly? It's just,
I think personally I've been quite lucky, because I think parents that attend our groups can see some sort of tangible results. And that's usually children leaving and singing songs, at home, or repeating the days of the week by, going poniedziałek, wtorek, sobota, niedziela. We have all these different stuff, things that can be repeated, and you can quite easily teach them to children. So this is really what parents want. we manage their expectations right from the start through education, because a lot of the parents that I meet are so well integrated into the British. They often have British partners or partners from elsewhere in the world, and they mostly use English on a daily basis. And it's about helping them understand that it's extremely important for them to use the minority language at home with their child on a daily basis. And I'm sure most people listening to this would have heard questions from parents where they say, well, what do I do if my partner can't understand me? Does it not sort of, what about my stepchildren who can't understand Polish? I can't just, not allow them to understand. So of course we try to teach them about all these different techniques. There's a lot that people can find in the Peach Guide as well about how they can deal with situations like that. And right from the start, every time somebody comes to my class, I ask them to fill out the questionnaire, and I ask about, how much Polish they actually use at home, and how they feel about it. We talk a lot about the parent's identity, because I think this is extremely important, because this is how I felt initially when I came to the UK. I think there are certain languages to which there's some kind of stigma attached, where some people don't want to be heard speaking the minority language on public transport or elsewhere. And I find that is the case with a lot of Polish parents. Not everybody, of course, but with a lot of people, where they feel like they shouldn't be using that language because somebody might look down on them as worse or something like that. So it's just about building that sort of confidence in them and pride. And if they feel confident speaking the language at home, if they know that they are doing a good job, they will come to us, to ask for advice. They will then realize that we are not the only source of language. We know that we can do our job very, very well, and that children will want to come back to our classes. They will go back home and role play the crocodile. One sibling will be the crocodile, the other one apparently will be me. So they pretend that they're me, sort of speaking the language, which is fantastic. And this is what the parents can see, So far, I've not had issues with parents being unhappy about how much children are learning, possibly because we also work with children who are quite young, and a lot of the children don't start speaking until they're 2.5 or 3, really. So they're quite passive during the lessons. But as long as the parents can see that the children want to come to classes, that they dance to the songs, and they try to sort of hum them at home, to them, that seems to be enough for now. This may change a little bit in the future when we start working with slightly older children when it comes to reading and writing, which is something I know we're going to talk about in a minute. But so far, personally, I've not had any issues, as long as I've been clear about the fact that we are not the only source of language.
Yes, absolutely, yes. So you mentioned the expectations are not that high, or are not a problem at the moment for your group. And the reason I wanted to ask this, because you are having a vertical group, so we call it vertical group. So you have children who are not verbal and others who are verbal, or maybe very, very chatty. So and some parents probably have also older children. So I know that the comparison between, my youngest child is not speaking yet, but my older child at that point was already speaking. And these kind of things, this kind of pressure that comes also from the expectations from the community or from whoever else, can have an influence on what the parents are expecting. Or, as you mentioned, also, if we don't know exactly what we are having to expect in the next kind of months or years in the development of the language in your children, we may have some doubts, or we may have some fears even. But you mentioned, yes, the Peach Guide for parents, which is something that I would like to point out as well. We are going to put it in the description of this video on YouTube so that everyone can find it. Which is probably also something that one can just recommend to parents to have a look at this guide, and have a look at what a child around that age can do when exposed to 2 or more languages on a regular basis, so that these expectations stay or are realistic and not too much, just not wanting to do too much in too little time.
Yeah, just to add to this, I get a lot of questions from parents whose 2-year-olds mix languages. They'll still use a lot of English, and they'll still use a lot of, and they will sort of add a few words of Polish to it. And it's just about explaining to them that this is, again, just a very natural phase to go through, that they reach that age, around the age of 3 or 4, depending on the child, where they start distinguishing between the language them
Yes.
to just use one with one parent and one with the other parent. And again, giving the parents the tools to know what to do, to know how to paraphrase, to know how to give children hints, to actually produce those more difficult words, at home.
Absolutely, yes. And we are now at one of the other questions that I had for you today. It's this motivation kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned in the presentation that you did for the Peach Summit a few weeks ago that sometimes the children just don't speak, or they are not speaking yet, either because they are too young or they have not been exposed to Polish enough to be confident enough to speak it. So how do you motivate the children in your play group not to speak the language? Now, thinking of those who already are verbal, but who use more the majority language or the English language in your situation, the language they usually speak with their peers, or to not only speak the community language when in your play group. I mean, in play groups, as we said, there are different kind of settings, right? The ones where you guide them, or the ones where you let them do something and you just enjoy being together. But if you have a situation where you see, okay, now we are meeting for an hour, and after 40 minutes, everyone is still speaking English or, or replying in English, what can I do? I mean, I know as someone who ran a play group like that in the past, and who also had to do a lot with reluctant or resistant children. How do you manage that, or what do you do? Because it can be frustrating for those who run the group or for the other parents as well.
Maybe because my group is very structured, there aren't many opportunities for children to speak the minority language. There's a lot going on. So our classes are usually about 45 minutes, 50 minutes long. This is how long children can focus on.
Yes.
There's a lot of movement. Every 5 minutes we do something different. In that time we probably sing about 10 different songs, if not more sometimes. There's a moment in the lesson where the crocodile arrives in his old suitcase, and the crocodile only speaks Polish, right? So the puppet is so important.
Yeah.
Again,
Yes.
there's been so much research about it. It's so important for children to associate either the puppet or the person running the group with that language. And so I never address children in Polish. I understand in English, sorry. I paraphrase what they say because, of course, I can understand what they're saying. However, I never reply to them in English. I really want them to associate me with Polish. So they will come to me. They'll either be, if they ask me for a sticker, they'll either be quiet, going like that, or they'll say, Proszę, and at least that's one word that they've just used, which is absolutely fine. What we do is we try to get get Polish words out of them, because most of them are passive bilingual, so they understand. They just find it difficult to speak. We definitely try to speak slowly to them so they can understand us. The young children, they're still learning. They may not have as much vocabulary as your standard children in Poland would. We like to make things fun, so we make intentional mistakes during the lesson. So the crocodile will come out and say something like, "Look at my lovely hat," and it's a sock. And they go, "No, it's not a hat, it's a sock," because of course they like to be the clever ones. They like to tell us what they know. We always give them limited choice. So if I know that the children are very young and they will only be replying using single words, I'll say, "Ooh, what do you know?" I don't know, what do monkeys eat? Apples or bananas? And then, a child that's not very confident will point to that particular thing, and they will, they might learn that word at that particular time, at that particular stage, and then use it in the following lessons or at some point at home. So we're giving them that language over here. So the little ones will listen or point, whereas the older ones will come over, grab the banana and feed it to the monkey, because they're the more confident ones. So lots and lots of limited choice so that children can hear the words as they come. We try to elicit words, if I'm saying something like, "Oh, what's this?" and say it's an umbrella, and everyone's quiet, or someone in fact uses the English words, I go, "Pa ra," and then they just give me the last syllable, sol, parasol, right? So I'm asking less of them, right? So I'm giving them hints, clues, things that can help them say something so they feel proud that they've said something. But I'm not asking them to use a very long 3-syllable word at that time, which can be very, very tricky, right?
Yes.
There's lots of other stuff that we do. Sometimes I try to be silly by playing with the pronunciation. So I say something like, "Oh, but how do we say it? Do we say szklanka or sklanka? Szklanka? Sklanka." I know to you, but there's probably no difference. Sorry. And they say, szklanka. Right, that's a glass, right? So they're teaching us how to pronounce words because their hearing is very well developed at that stage. We're actually able to, help check whether they can actually hear those sounds well. It helps with, potentially maybe referring them to a speech therapist if there is some kind of issue. We try to introduce elements of speech therapy in our classes as well to help them pronounce words in the correct way. It's all just about being theatrical, being silly, and children wanting to get involved. It's about making sure that when they speak the language to us, they can actually interact with us, so they can come over and shake the crocodile's hand. If we take out lots of different clothes out of the suitcase, that they can try them on. There was one time when we brought lots of 10 new pairs of pants, and it was all about dressing your parents and making sure that they put the pants on the head. So silly, isn't it? The pants on the foot. On the foot? No, you're not supposed to do that, right? And it means that they will then repeat those games at home and try to practice that language at home when they go back. And then I think lastly, I don't expect them to reply. I think it's sometimes I think the way some of us were raised, it was very much like, now repeat, speak, you must say this. Children aren't like that. My son is not like that. He's a very stubborn boy. And it's just about, again, creating that very positive association with the language. Like, I don't expect you to say anything, but if you manage to finish the last syllable of that word, then we're going to be super proud of you. We're going to clap. I'm going to say, "Wow, amazing," right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I am 100% behind you, because my children also, if they were asked to say something in one of their languages, they would just turn silent, and I was the same. And this brings me also to another topic, but it's not for us today. But really to be aware that the children have each their very own communication style, and this does not necessarily need to be the same as their parents. Sometimes it's a different style than the one of the parents, and then in different settings. So maybe they are very chatty at home or with their friends, but then in that group they might not be that chatty. So I like your approach. That's very positive and not yes, pressuring the children, neither the children or the parents, I must say, to say something or to be involved or to be very active, but also to just decide on the day, or however you're feeling that day at that moment, to either participate or to observe or to jump around or not. And I think you mentioned it before, that you have an approach or you have a style in your play group where there are different things that the children can do. So they can move around. Of course, it depends on the place. Yes, if it's a very small place, or maybe just a room in a cafe or something, you might have some restrictions about movements and noise, etc. I know that a friend of mine in Germany had this issue in a place where she was, where they were saying that I'm just making too much noise, but then she got a carpet and it was nicer. But anyways, these are so side effects of organizing these get-togethers, and not the most important part. But yes, so keeping the language alive in these settings, you mentioned before, it's maybe 1 hour a week. It's not that much, so we don't have to expect miracles, but magic, I would say, maybe this magic that the children and the parents can take home with them. And have you had any, because I did a little survey about parents in our area here with the different play groups and then also after school activities, so the children were older, about how the other parents managed to keep their minoritized languages alive. You mentioned it before that not all the parents use the language on a regular basis. Do you know how they used to manage to keep their languages
Yeah.
alive?
So I think it's very different. I'm personally extremely lucky because my husband's English, but he's a linguist. He speaks French, Spanish. He did some German at school, and we've been together for 14 years, and he's picked up Polish, over that time. So he understands most things that I say to my son at home, which makes my life a lot easier because most of the time I don't need to translate. However, I probably know one more dad who's also a linguist, and has found it a little bit easier to pick up Polish over time. But let's be honest, it's there are certain languages that are very, very difficult to learn, and not everybody is a linguist, and not everybody is able to do it. Yes, there's of course it's all about managing expectations. It's all about educating them about the value of it, because I think that the people who have struggled most have been the ones whose families resisted, right? And we know a lot about that. And I think what we found is that it's extremely important to find times in the day when you're with your child on your own, and when you're able to feel free to speak that language. Yes, of course, you may use different tools, like trying to say the same thing twice at the dinner table, but that can be a little bit difficult for some parents, particularly in those families. Say, I have some friends who have stepchildren who are teenagers and who don't speak Polish. And so it's you and your child who speaks Polish, and then three other people in the family who can't understand a word of it. Not because they're not willing to learn, but it's just not the same level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot harder. So I think in those cases, a lot of people try to go for the time and place option, where they really try to make time in the week, or in the day, say at bath time, at bedtime, whenever, when they read a lot, when they speak that language a lot, just with their child one on one, to make sure that there is enough input.
Yes.
That I find that also just encouraging people to use a lot of music at home really, really helps. Children love, say, we've been extremely lucky because we've collaborated with some very talented musicians, and have co-written a CD. with 25 Polish songs, which is great, because these days, children go back home and they listen to those songs at home. They're able to sing them again at the class. That's absolutely fantastic. But of course, this is something that not everybody's going to do. What we started off with at the beginning was simply choosing some songs that we liked, finding them on Spotify, which is quite common here. You can find other platforms as well, and simply creating a playlist for parents to use at home. So they were able to play those songs in the car. That is the perfect place, really. The car, I think most people who drive know this is the perfect place to be singing those songs. Try to find the time in the morning or in the evening to learn through music, because it's the kind of thing that everybody can enjoy. And I now have, English speaking dads who know how to count to 10 because they've listened to that song 100 times,
Exactly. Yeah.
and that really helps. It means that they're then keen to join in, they're keen to use words with children in Polish, and it's a fun language to
Yeah.
learn. I think it really depends on everybody's individual situation at
Yeah.
home, but yeah.
Absolutely. I would like to quote a friend of mine who is a musician, and he's always defending this thing that music is the international language. Of course, we are talking now about Polish songs or German songs, Italian songs, Romanian songs, etc. But actually, the music, the singing along with a child, or the approach to a language through music is so effective. And I would like to dedicate this little moment also to those, like you mentioned, who might not be supported by their partner, by their environment to maintain the language, to please not give up and to find these songs. You mentioned Spotify. There are many places where you can find some. We have a Spotify list in our Peach bilingual Spotify list. You can go there, and we will link to it maybe in the comments on YouTube, where we are collecting songs in different languages. And if you have any, please let us know, and we can add them so that other parents can benefit from it and listen to these songs. And what I heard from some parents who were in this situation where the partner was not very convinced that passing on that language was important, or for whatever reason, they practically managed to have these, like you said, time and place moments at home, and to expand them in a way that, like, an hour before going to the playgroup, they were listening to the songs, so they get into it, and then the other parent would say, what is this song about? It's counting, for example, the ABC, or all the animals of the farm or of the zoo. And so seeing the child so enthusiastic about the other language and having the feeling, oh, but I don't understand, I want to understand, that can be a nice shift. Not always happens, but it can be helpful. And through music, it seems to be more feasible. Let's hope. But anyways, I would like to send this message to those parents who don't have this kind of support, to please reach out and to have a look at songs, audiobooks, everything that you can get to transmit your language, and to not stop doing it, please.
Yeah.
It is so important for your child.
I think the thing about songs is, I think it's a very interesting topic, because I found myself when I first had my son, when he was a baby, I'm quite into music, but I couldn't recall anything from my own nursery times, and I ended up just singing Christmas carols to him, and lots of people, one of my friends just ended up singing all the Warsaw Uprising songs from the 1940s, things that you remembered from school but weren't really appropriate for children, at the time. So, however, it doesn't really matter, because all they want to do is they just want to hear you speak that language. It's that
Absolutely.
connection that you build with your child. Your voice, it doesn't matter whether you can sing or not, really. It's just about trying to establish that rapport with them. With time, if you can find something, you can find so many resources online. It's a good idea to to look for songs that are written, I would say, aimed at quite young children, especially if your child doesn't feel very confident speaking the language. So, for example, we use a lot of songs which are aimed at 2-year-old Polish children, because they tend to be a little bit easier in terms of vocabulary, and they tend to come with a lot of gestures and actions, which always helps. And children love, sing and sign and all these different combinations. I recommend joining some Facebook groups. So I'm part of Facebook groups for example, preschool children, preschool teachers in Poland, creative preschool children in Poland. And I simply post every now and again, guys, I'm looking for a simple song about Santa. Send me your recommendations. And this is such a good resource because those people work with children in Poland on a daily basis. So you can do exactly the same in your languages and see if you can find help there, you can share your own ideas. And in the same way, I think it's a really good idea to follow people like speech and language therapists, because they work with children that age. They have a lot of ideas, a lot of experience, and they will, I don't know, say in Polish, we work with children who at the age of 5 to 7 start doing the rolling R, the R sound, which is not common in many other languages. So again, you need to find places where people will be able to give you ideas on what to do, how to, in a playful way, teach that to the children. So you're not on your own. Look for ideas elsewhere, right?
Yes,
and lots of people
absolutely.
will be able to help you.
Absolutely. And I really like your suggestion to follow speech therapists. I do the same. I also work with speech therapists, but it is very important for parents. I mean, when we have children, we cannot read everything about all the developmental phases, etc., related with motor skills and language skills, etc. But what is very important for parents to know, and this is the part that I find very, very helpful for whoever runs a playgroup or plays with children or has children, actually, generally speaking, and raises them also with different languages, that there are sounds that the children, very young children, just cannot articulate yet. So we cannot expect a 2-year-old to roll the r, like you mentioned. We have it also in Italian, and in some even German dialects we have that. But it is not that realistic. Some can maybe for some reason, but others not yet. And it takes many years to get there and to be able to pronounce and to articulate all the sounds of all the languages. If you compare the sounds, if your child grows up maybe with 3 languages and they have different kind of sounds every language, and that there are overlappings, of course. But I remember, for example, when my son started going to the British preschool, and he was able to roll a bit the r, but behind, so in the more uvular sound, it was a r. And he started speaking then English, and all of a sudden all his R's became an English R. So il carro, il carro, instead of il carro or il carro. And it was very nice to observe. And I saw, well, this is something that can happen, and that's perfectly normal. So we have these overlappings and this code switching, code mixing that is going on anyways. But again, I would also recommend to follow some speech therapists and to ask them also, what can we expect and what can we do if we see that a child is reluctant in playing. Or I work also with child psychologists. So if there is a child that is really not wanting to speak or is not wanting to relate with each other or not connecting with the other children, there are so many things that we can observe in our young children in these settings. And I find it very, very interesting and so important, really, to focus, at least for that hour or 45 minutes, depending on how much time we have, on our children and on other families who are actually going through the same kind of phases at different moments, maybe. But that's it. So I like your recommendation to look for inspiration a bit everywhere. So online, these groups that you mentioned, maybe you can share some in the description afterwards.
Yeah.
and also, yes, the CD that you have done for those who are maybe planning to start a play group for Polish. So that
This is
is
actually it's quite interesting because it's soon to be available on Spotify as well, and there are three versions of it. There's a French, there's an English, and there's a Polish version.
okay.
And they're all fantastic songs. They're very, very simple but really catchy. So
Okay.
I'll definitely send you the link.
Absolutely, yes, please share. I would like to share a comment from Roberta Stefan. It's a very long one. She is in Milan, and she has a playgroup of English-speaking kids as a second language. Parents and kids get together with other families. They organize different activities. Everyone can organize them in and around Milan. So please, Roberta, leave the link to this group in the comments so that other parents can find you. If there are costs, we share them. This was at the beginning of our interview, I think, a comment. We are more than 200 families now. We use WhatsApp. So with WhatsApp, depending on how you want to connect, to help with the organizations. It works very well. I'd like to know more about this, Roberta, if you have time, maybe to join somehow. We would like to know more about this. Let's go maybe ahead of time, really speaking. You mentioned your son is now 4 years old. So
5, yeah. 5.
5, sorry.
Mm.
And what do you think will happen when he will be older or not that interested anymore in the kind of activities that you're doing at this play group? And what will happen with you? Will you continue leading it or being involved with it? Or will you expand it and say, okay, it's from 12 months to 6 years or 7 years, or maybe split it? You mentioned at the moment you don't split it. Is there anything that you plan? And especially the reason why I'm asking this is because I saw that the transition between play groups to after school activities in that language caused sometimes a really drastic decrease of interest, for the simple reason because it was not that appealing to the children anymore, because there was not the play involved. The parents were not there. They were sitting at tables very often and they had to do certain things. So it was really a guided and very teaching kind of environment that was not appealing for, let's say, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. Which leads me also to think that maybe continuing a kind of playgroup setting, a more playful way to transmit language also for older children would be maybe a good solution for every child. Yes, because when in the moment where the language that we speak anyways at home and that we enjoy speaking with our parents and with some of our friends, all of a sudden becomes a topic, a subject, where you have to find the verbs and all the articles, etc. It can be quite discouraging and frustrating also for the children. I know that for my children it was. And so I found other ways to bridge that. But what do you think will happen now for your personal situation, or what do you see in the future about this when the children outgrow a playgroup?
Sure. So it's kind of happened already, really, because so my son Felix has just turned 5 and he started his first year at school a couple of months ago. And so right now, our children, so mine and my friends' children, have mostly stopped coming to our group. There's only one still attending because she's still quite small. We also found that even in the last year, because they were the oldest ones, there were times when we had to really think about the structure of the group because they were being quite disruptive at times, simply because they were just more capable, So it was just about making sure that we differentiated very, very well between the different levels of proficiency and just general development there in the classes. What we said to ourselves is, of course, there is that risk. Our main goal initially was to set up the group for our children And we feel like we've ticked that box because we've got them really interested in the language. They have very positive associations with the language, with the country, with the culture itself. And we want to carry on. So what we want to do is, the plan is to follow our children and to keep going with the group aimed at preschool kids. However, the plan from January is to start developing a new program, because we simply want to help our little ones. And from January onwards, we'll be meeting every Monday afternoon after school, and we're going to be learning how to read and write, but in a playful way. So again, one of the Peach ambassadors, Yoshito, has some amazing ideas which he's shared with me. So I'm definitely going to use them. And I've been doing quite a lot of research of my own related to Polish in particular, and the idea is to not make them sit, and to keep it fun, to play games, to do it in a small group. I think this is quite important. So there will only be 4 or 5 of them. Again, initially mostly our children, but maybe 2 or 3 other joining in the future. And of course, it's going to be challenging because they're not all the same age. There's for example, there's a 2-year difference between a couple of siblings, so one would have been at school in England for some time. They're not at the same stage. However, I feel like if we play games, this is something that will help us sort of follow a similar rhythm. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to offer something like that to our preschool children who will have started school, and will want to carry on with us. We're extremely lucky where we are because we have a local Polish Saturday school, and our children have been attending it for the last 2 years. This is their 2nd year now, and it's amazing. It's run really well by some local volunteers. However, as you say, because it's a more structured environment, as they get older, they are expected to be sitting down, working at desks. And for children who are at school anyway, Monday to Friday, it's quite a big ask, isn't it? So what we want to continue doing is to continue being that fun place, the one that they want to join. So whether that's by adapting and learning how to read during, a walk in the woods, that's all feasible. This is all possible as long as it's planned well. So this is the plan, and hopefully, it will work out.
Yes, absolutely. But it's I always recommend, yes, to think a little bit ahead of time, even when the children are maybe 3 years old. What is going to happen in a year, in 2 years? What am I going to do? And maybe to find someone who can take over the previous group, or to still keep in contact and to have some joined celebrations. For example, you were mentioning before around Christmas or around Easter or whatever, the 1st of June, for example, that you mentioned, where you celebrate children. Yes, I would also do this shout out to Yoshito, who is also a fellow Peach ambassador, one of our fellow Peach ambassadors. His name is Yoshito Darmon Shimamori, and he has published his book that it's the Parent's Guide to Raising Multi-Literate Children. I will link to it as well.
It's fantastic.
He has a lot of ideas on how to, yes, implement the literacy and keep children motivated, right? Great. Thank you very much, Kat Jeffries. It was a great honor to talk about this morning, and I think we could go on and on. I see that maybe it's a time where many parents are busy with other things, but it has been a great interview, and thank you very much for sharing all these very important and inspiring insights and ideas that you have about starting and running and continuing to run a minority language play group. And for those who are following us, if you're watching this on a replay, please leave me a comment below. We can get back to you with and continue this conversation afterwards as well. And if you like this video, I ask you kindly to please click subscribe and click the bell to be notified every time that I publish a new video or an interview here. And let us continue the conversation. It was a real pleasure again, Kat.
Thank
And
you.
I say goodbye to everyone who is following us live. Thank you very much for your comments and for your likes and for your encouragements.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.